How did you feel when it ended?
I felt great. I did everything that I could out there. You know, I wanted to experience things, so I had deprivations at the end of each sort of segment. So I blindfolded myself for a week because I was curious what that sensory deprivation of being alone and blind in the desert would be. And then, and then I also had some earplugs from Germany that were you know, that were very efficient. So I was without hearing for a week. And then I did the full Helen Keller blindfold and no hearing for another week. And then I did sleep deprivation, sleep, food, and water all at the same time. I was so exhausted by that time that was really the toughest week, and that was near the end. But these are different exercises that are done in many world thought traditions, many religions, in order to give you a different perspective. Like, what am I going to learn from this? And I learned things from each one. And there's a pain element that I didn't have. Most world religions and thought traditions have some sort of pain element, like wearing this itchy shirt, you know, or flagellating yourself. So I thought, maybe I'll wear a barbed wire collar because there's a bunch of barbed wire around there. And that next day I was walking and there was a barbed wire collar on a fence post, and I just picked it up and put it on.
Crown of Jesus' crown of thorns.
Put around the neck, and I wore that for 100 days. And that was interesting.
So wait a minute, so you said you learned a lot. What did you learn from all these deprivation
you know, each had its
exercises?
lessons. So the barbed wire collar was, you know, it's hard to sleep and these metal spikes are sticking in your face. You learn that it's sort of like a bad relationship. So you get so used to this thing around your neck that sometimes I'd have to take it off to like change, because I didn't want my clothes ripping on this thing. I'd take it off for a second just to put a jacket on or whatever, and I would feel this anxiety because something was missing. I didn't feel comfortable. Something was missing. And I realized that this thing that gave me pain, I preferred the familiarity of having that pain than not having that pain. So it's like a bad relationship, you know? You're with someone, and even though it's awful, you prefer the familiarity of their, of them being with you than to have it gone. You know, when you're blind, you really have to think about where you put things. And that's obvious.
Not to laugh at the blind,
but I had to organize things so that I know exactly where I put them. And if you lost something, it was gone forever. And when you take the blindfold off a week later, it's right there. You've been going like this for a week, and it's right there. And so you had to be very careful. I had to like map out and I had a staff, so I mapped out my area. And that was the only time that I felt really sort of lonely. I realized how much sight and being able to, the sky gave me a lot of company. It was always changing with clouds, and I'd watch these thunderstorms. I'd watch a blue sky in the morning, and these distant mountains, the moisture gets sucked up into the air, and these big clouds form, and then later in the day, these clouds would get bigger and more full with moisture, and these thunderstorms would go raging across the desert, and under the skirts of rain, the desert would make paths of green under the exact trail of the thundercloud, a path of green that would be gone the next day, and then always rainbows. And when the thunderstorms ended and the rainbows came out, the coyotes everywhere would go nuts. They just loved after the storm, man. Just little tiny things that you'd never imagine.
Nah,
you know?
I would never imagine any of these things.
Rattlesnakes in the mornings, almost every morning, would just lay themselves out, stretched out to get the morning sun, and they're super safe then because they can't strike. So they're just extended. So you could just get up against these rattlesnakes and you know, I'm not going to fuck with it, but you know, you learn how to exist with the creatures around you. When I first came into my area, the birds would chirp and the animals would bark warnings that I was there. Within a couple months, I was accepted by the animals in the area, and they would make warnings when some other alien or stranger was in our area. I could walk through my area in silence.
Part of the environment. When you came out of this, do you remember the first person you talked to?
The rancher.
What was that like, using your voice again?
Well, 2 months in, I was trying to howl at the coyotes, and I lost my voice, and I realized that I better start exercising my vocal cords, so I started singing every day.
I see.